this Mongoose out on the trails, posting images on the forums, and making videos for YouTube, I've actually received a lot of questions about how I changed out the original shifter for this rapid fire shifter. This is a very simple, very inexpensive upgrade to make, and it's going to change the way this Mongoose performs entirely. As far as it goes, it only cost me about $15 for the shifter. You only need some simple hand tools, and it'll take maybe an hour, hour and a half of your time to do. This is a repair that's really easy to do and really inexpensive. It can typically be completed with tools that people have around the household. If you don't have any of these tools, you can pick them up really cheap at your local auto parts store. To start, you're going to need a 2.5mm Allen wrench. You're going to need a Phillips head screwdriver. You're going to need either a 9mm wrench, an 11/32 wrench, or an adjustable wrench. And last but not least, you're going to need a pair of either flat nose or needle nose pliers. In addition to the tools, you're also going to need a way of lifting the bike off the floor but keeping it stationary so that you can make adjustments to the derailleur. I personally use these inexpensive ratchet straps that I picked up from a local tool store that specializes in cheap tools. So the very first thing I do is I go to the rear derailleur and I remove the cable from the housing. Now what you're going to do is you're going to need your pliers to pull this end cap off. You just kind of squeeze it and eventually it'll pop off. And then the next thing you're going to need is your wrench, and all you're going to do is loosen this nut right here until the cable comes loose from the clamp. And as soon as that cable comes loose, you can snake it out and you can actually pull it back out of the adjuster with the housing. Now the next order of business is to remove your shifter. I've got the brake lever removed just for ease of view, however the brake lever would typically be right here. Now to move your shifter, you're going to take your 2mm Allen key and you're going to find the set screw on the bottom of the shifter housing. You're basically just going to insert that until you get it seated in there, loosen, and it's loose as can be. Now, once you've got the shifter loosened, you can actually pull it forward and out of the way so that you can remove your grip. Now to remove your grip, I typically just use a bottle of water and I just squeeze a little bit under the edges of the grips and just let it run in there a little bit, kind of work it around. And then once you get it in there and worked around really good, you'll see the grip will basically just walk itself right off of the bars. And there you have it. Now once your grip is removed, you can simply take your shifter, pull it off of the housing, and then actually I just pull it all the way through and your cable will actually come out with it. Okay, good news. We've got the original shifter removed. That was ridiculously easy. The next step is to go ahead and install your new shifter. Now what I do is I just slide this onto the bar and I just tighten it down with my 5mm, just really loosely to hold it in place while I go through and do my cable routing. There you have it. Okay, so now we're ready to go ahead and put our cable in place. You'll remember when you took this off, you'll have 3 pieces of conduit. You'll have a long piece, a medium piece, and a short piece. Now the long piece goes on first, and it goes between the shifter and the gusset here. Your second piece is the short one, and it goes between the gusset and this one here. And then your final piece is the medium length one, and this is the one that actually goes to the adjuster on your derailleur. So all you're going to have to do is take the cable and be very careful with the end of the cable so that it does not fray. If it frays, you're not going to be able to get it through the housings. And then you're just going to simply feed it in, and I kind of give it a little twist there, and that just kind of helps prevent it from any sort of kinks or fray. And then you feed it through. Eventually it'll pop out the other end, and then you'll be able to go ahead and install these. So now we got to get those cables routed into place. So first thing we're going to do is just move that conduit up and get it into the fitting on your rapid shifter, and then it just sits right into that gusset there, and you can see it just kind of sits in and the cable hangs out. You're going to run the rest of the cable back to this rear one where you've got your now center section of conduit, and you're going to hook that into this gusset here and then into this rear one right here. And you may have to flex it a little bit, but the nice thing is that'll keep it real tight up against the frame. And then finally, you run this rear one back into this rear gusset, and you push it up tight, and then you take your cable end, you run it through the adjuster here, and you run the other end of your conduit right through there. And that's exactly how it should look. So it should be nice and tight between the shifter and this gusset, nice and tight between these two, and then nice and tight between here and the rear of derailleur. Our next step is to make sure that the shifter is in first gear, so if it's not already, just make sure it's there, make sure it can't go any further. And then what we got to do is we got to come back here to the rear, and we've got to set the chain so that it's in the right position. So what we're going to do is we're simply going to take the tension off of the chain. I'm going to bring it up into that first gear position, and it may be kind of hard. The derailleur may fight you a little bit as you go, but once you get it up on there, we're going to want to take and push it all the way over, so as far inboard as you possibly can push it. And you can see it's right about there. Then what we're going to want to do is we're going to take our cable, we're going to put it into that little clamp fitting in the rear. Just make sure it's nice and tight, pulled tight before we tighten this down. And then we're going to take our wrench, we're going to tighten that nut down. And we want to get it pretty good and tight because you don't want that cable to slip out as we're making our adjustments. There we go. And that should hold it pretty well in place. Alright you guys, so good news. At this point it means that we have the shifter installed on the bike. The cable's routed, it's connected at the derailleur, and now we just need to make our adjustments just so it goes through all the gears properly. At this point, it's when you're going to need to lift your bike up off of the ground so that you can pedal the bike without it moving and go through and make your gear changes using the shifter and adjustments at the derailleur. So to suspend the bike, what I do is I actually use 2 ratchet straps. And what I do is I take a C-clamp and I hook it onto this shelf reinforcement right here, and you got to get it on really tight, just so you can run the ratchet strap through it and use it as a holding mechanism. I run the other ratchet strap over a rafter just above the bike, and then I'll show you how I hook it up to the bike. So I've gone to a bit of a wider angle just so you can see what I'm doing. I've got my one ratchet strap wrapped around the handlebars and the stem here. I've got the other one connected to my seat reinforcement bars right here. And basically all you got to do is ratchet them, and your bike will slowly lift up off the ground. Okay, so as you can see, the bike is suspended. You can now spin the wheel freely without the concern of the tire rubbing on the ground while you're making your adjustments. Okay, so earlier we put it in first gear, and basically all we're looking to do there is to pull all the slack out of the cable while we make our final assembly. Now, when we're making our adjustments, we actually need this to be in our highest gears, so out near 7th, so we can work our way from top to bottom, if you will. So what we're going to do is we're going to loosen that cable back up, and I just hold it on the inboard side of that derailleur because it's going to slip through a little bit. And I want to hold it so it doesn't lose any slack, but I want that derailleur to come out so that it's at its most relaxed point near 7th gear. And what I do is I actually just pedal the bike very gently and let it drop out until we hit 7th. And there we go. Okay, so now that we've got our cable loose, we've got it dropped down into 7th gear, what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to adjust our high limit screw until the entire derailleur comes over and aligns with our 7th gear. So what I do is I just leave this cable loose and slacked out, and then what I'm going to do is make my adjustment on this screw, and I try to only go maybe a quarter turn at a time while I look at the rear, and I want this thing to align perfectly so that the wheels here align perfectly with 7th, and I'm almost there, so maybe another quarter turn or so, a little more, like a half turn, and there we go. So what we can do now is we can go ahead and tighten up our cable, and we'll go ahead and start making our adjustments. Okay, so we've got it in 7th gear. Now we're going to need to run it through all the gears just to see how it shifts, and then we're going to have to make our finite adjustments as it goes. So what we'll start by doing is just pedal the bike, get that wheel spinning, and then click through the gears. Okay, so we've got an adjustment between 7th and 6th that needs to occur. We could probably just take care of that right here with this barrel at the back. So let's give it about a quarter turn and see what happens. Yep, okay. So let's go to 5th, and it went nice. 4th, nice. 3rd, good. 2nd, okay, so we got slightly more adjustment to make. And this is when our high adjustment screw is going to come into play because we're probably hitting the stop. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull that out about a quarter turn, and we're going to see what happens. Ooh, that got us real close. I bet you if I went just another little bit, it's going to be nice and clean. Okay, so let's try it out here. Good. Let's go to 1st. Let's see. And that looks like we might be hitting our stop, so let's go a little further. Let's see what happens. Okay, so first, we're not catching. So I try to make finite adjustments with that barrel. And if I can't get it with those finite adjustments, we're going to have to come out more with that screw. So let's bring that stop out. A quarter turn or so, maybe a little more. Now let's see if it'll grab first. There it goes. Okay. So, what I usually do is I run it through the gears. I just make sure it jumps every time you click. And then I run it back up just to see everything's smooth. We still need just a little bit between that 2nd and 1st drop. So let's go a little bit more. Now let's give it one more run through the gears. So 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th. Let's go back up through them. 4, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Awesome. Alright, if you're this far, it means you've successfully installed your shifter and you've gone through and made your derailleur adjustments. Now, the final touches are still going to need to be put on, so don't forget you're going to have to put on your new grip. It's going to have to be a full size because that original one is a half size. In addition, you're going to have to make the adjustments to your controls just to get them in the right positions for your hands. Now, on your first test ride, if this thing doesn't shift absolutely perfectly, don't worry. The cable is actually going to go through a bit of a slacking up process where it stretches a little bit, so over the next 5-10 rides, you'll probably have to make really minor adjustments. So hey, I wanted to thank you guys for stopping in and watching the video. If you liked what you saw, please go ahead and subscribe. At that same rate, if you've got any questions or suggestions, go ahead and throw them down there in that comment section. Thanks again, you guys.